Alabama and Georgia are going to play for a national championship again. They played for an SEC championship about a month ago, and that means it's time for one of the absolute lamest things that has become a recent trend in sports, college football chief among them for us, and that is people out there with no skin in the game whatsoever, no ownership of a network, no stock invested in a network, starting to tell you about TV ratings, and they're going to start to justify their argument based on TV ratings. I don't care. I'm Tommy Lee Jones on The Fugitive. I don't care. Could not care less. You should not care less. Is that right? I think. You shouldn't care. Unless you own Disney, unless you are an investor in this, what do you care about TV ratings? And what they're going to do, of course, is they're going to tell you if this game gets a lower number than its predecessors, that means that it's bad for college football. If it's a good game, it's a good game. Good football is good for college football. There are arguments to be made that the hyper-regionality of any given matchup may not be best for TV viewership numbers. I know what you guys mean. It's not like we're stupid over here in the corner laughing at you. I know what it means. I don't think you know what it means. If we were to really, by the way, get into the weeds and get into a nuanced television metrics discussion, and I were to ask you, let's talk about the itemization of account sharing in Rentrack metrics. What would you say about that? You wouldn't even know. I just spoke Portuguese to you. So there's a lot of nuance that goes into that argument anyway, and the conversation about modern day ratings. So really, if I wanted to, I could tie you in a pretzel when we're talking about that. And then a TV executive could tie me in a pretzel when he was talking about that. All the while, none of it matters because we got a game, an actual on-the-field game. That's what we understand. That's what we want to talk about here. I want to talk first and foremost about what this means for each program. This is not the game breakdown. The game breakdown is going to happen later in the week. I want you to make sure you appreciate what you're seeing right now. This could be Nick Saban's best coaching job. I was perusing the NFL draft numbers last night. Do you remember? It wasn't all that long ago. It was last spring. Alabama just littered the first round of the NFL draft. They had 6 guys, I believe, go in the first round. They had 2 more go in the 30 to 40 range. What that means is Nick Saban is about to play for a national championship after having to replace 8 of the top 40 draft picks in the NFL draft. Not 4 years ago. It's just last spring that happened. And so not only are they playing without Najee Harris, and you got Jalen Waddle out the door, Mac Jones out the door, Devontae Smith out the door, you got your offensive line out the door, brand new quarterback never started, brand new offensive coordinator. Oh, by the way, they lost Jace McClellan and Roydell Williams during the season. You drop the pen and you say, you're kidding me. They're still playing for a national championship? That team should have 4 losses, and they're playing for a national championship. I pointed that out yesterday, and I had most people who rightfully were in amazement. Then I had some people who wanted to pretend like they're capable of overthinking the room come in and say, well, yeah, but when you recruit like they do, it's easy. No, it's not. It's not easy even when you don't lose a bunch of guys to the draft and you recruit like they do. If you want to know how true that is, ask Georgia how easy it's been to get to the national championship. Ask Texas A&M. They're loading up players right now. You go ask Jimbo Fisher how easy. 5 years from now, ask him how easy it's been. I don't care how many times they've gone. How easy has it been? It is critically important to understand what happens once you get the talent on campus. It's not just you go sign up the 5 stars and then it's kind of Xbox from there. And they just go take care of business. That's kind of, we use the restaurant metaphor all the time when it comes to talent acquisition. That's like us going to a 5-star restaurant and saying, well, yeah, but you've got all the best ingredients in that kitchen. So, of course, this meal's great. And the chef's over there saying, hello, look, what about me? I'm a pretty important factor here. Yeah, the talent is what you begin with. It's what you do with the talent. And a lot of it's very green in nature. And then they got a lot of that green talent injured this year, and they're still playing for a national championship. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Alabama's playing with house money. I'm not going to tell you they're in a nothing-to-lose mentality. When you're playing a competitive sport, there's always something to lose for both parties. It's a game. In this case, it's a championship. So you have maximum to lose. Both parties have maximum to lose. But the mentality's different. And I grant you that because one guy's got, 7 national championships now, half a dozen at his current stop, and the other guy's yet to win one as a head coach. Which brings me to the University of Georgia. What do you think about the magnitude of this moment? I'm asking you because I really want your answers. I want you to kind of think it out loud before you hear what I say, because I think sometimes I look at our comment section and I think sometimes I'll say something, and if you haven't thought critically about it before, you just kind of go with that, which is dangerous, by the way. If it's my voice that you're just kind of blindly following, what a dangerous proposition in life. So before I give you my thoughts on this, if you're riding around tomorrow down in Ocilla, Georgia, or if you're in Fargo, North Dakota, where the high was like -5 today, by the way, I want you to think out loud, how big is the magnitude of this moment for Georgia? All right, now that I gave you adequate time to think it out loud, I'm going to tell you, this is a must-win game for Georgia. Fully believe that. I rarely say that, but I fully believe this is a must-win game for Georgia. It is critically important that they get this done. You don't get many opportunities at this. It is a true must-win situation for them, not just if they want to win a national championship. Now, this is a must-win situation for Georgia as a program. Sometimes you don't realize that you're at a crossroads until long after it's in the rearview mirror. But this is a different situation. I think you can realize this is a true crossroads inflection point for the Georgia program. Mark Richt had his in 2012, but we didn't know it at the time. They get so close in that SEC title game. They get down inside the 10-yard line, but time runs out, and they don't beat Alabama. They would have gone on almost certainly to do the same thing to Notre Dame in the title game that Alabama did. Mark Richt ends up being a national championship winning coach. The entire tenor and trajectory of the Georgia program is forever changed, and ditto for Mark Richt, but he didn't get it done. They didn't get it done, and that was it. That was all she wrote. This sport, even when you recruit and invest to the level that Georgia does, provides you a very finite amount of opportunities at grabbing the belt. They had one in 2017. They hadn't been back since. Now they're back. They've got the best team I believe they've had under Kirby Smart. This is by far the best opportunity they've had. It's by far the most workable path they've had, and it's by far the most vulnerable, relatively speaking, Alabama's been. This is a crossroads moment for them, and if they cannot grab that belt next Monday night, the tenor totally shifts from always thinking that there are better things, the best is still yet to come, to, I wonder if we're ever going to get it done. And I don't think it would be totally unfair to think like that. It's also important to note, we talked about this last week, 2 weeks ago, I guess it has been now. When I talk like that, I'm talking about as it relates to a Nick Saban world. Because there's a post-Saban world coming up sometime down the road. I'm not telling you, in other words, here's what I'm trying to say. I'm not telling you if Kirby Smart doesn't win a title next week, he just never will. That's not what I'm telling you. What I'm telling you is, as long as Nick Saban's going to be at Alabama, this will probably be Smart's best shot. I don't know, maybe in a lower percentage situation somewhere down the road he does beat him. This is his best shot. And it's certainly the point in time where he's got to get it done before that mood sort of changes around his program. Now, just as we say that, I want to remind you the point we made last week for everyone, if Georgia doesn't get the job done, who's going to want to sell all their Georgia stock and sell all their Kirby Smart stock. Nick Saban was 55 when he got to Alabama. Kirby Smart's 10 years younger than that right now. And so if Saban coaches for another 7 or 8 years and retires, Kirby takes over as one of, if not the top dogs, pun intended, in the sport, and he'll still be younger than Saban was when he got to Alabama. Saban's been at Alabama a decade and a half now. Kirby's still 10 years younger than Saban was when he got there. There is a huge window of post-Saban football somewhere down the road for Kirby Smart and Marcus Freeman, whoever is around at that point. But in this world, you know as well as I do, if it comes time for Nick Saban to leave whenever he does, and you haven't gotten it done against him, like Dabo Swinney has a couple of times, if you haven't gotten it done against him, it'll always eat at you. It'll always be what they follow the comma in your bio with. Well, Kirby Smart won a title, comma, but it was after Nick Saban vacated the premises. You don't want that. This is his best shot. Side note, just want to point out a side note before we move on here. It's going to shock you. But the expansionists are wrong, as they usually are. You're going to hear in the build-up and lead-up to this game, absent people's ability to make well-rounded football-based commentary and points on this game, they're going to start talking about how this matchup relates to the conversation around expanding the playoff. I'm not going to revisit all our opinions on that tonight. This is not a segment about playoff expansion, but you're going to have some people tell you, maybe you're thinking this as well, that an all-SEC national championship is proof that we need to expand the playoff. That, of course, is false. What an all-SEC championship is just that. It's an all-SEC championship. But I want to remind you of something. I want to remind you that had we still been in the BCS era, we would not have seen Georgia even make the national title game. It would have been Alabama, Michigan. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because we clearly see that these are the two best teams in the country. Georgia body-bagged Michigan the other night. Some people had to see it happen in order to believe it. I was surprised at the ease with which they disposed of Michigan, but we saw it. Okay, so we realized we got the two best teams in the country. I don't think many people are debating that at this point. But in the old model, one of these teams would not have made it. Why am I making that point? Well, I'm making the point because an expanded playoff, just from 2 to 4, allowed this matchup to happen. The expansionist crowd out there is falsely trying to lead you to believe that we need to expand it more so that we can have more opportunities for more programs. The only programs that are ultimately going to end up benefiting from that larger opportunity are probably going to be programs that also reside in that 3-letter conference down south that a lot of you despise so much, and understandably so. Question for you, and then we'll move on. If an all-SEC national championship is bad, what's going to happen when you get to 12 teams and eventually it gets whittled down and within the first couple of years you have an all-SEC semifinal? Because let me remind you of something. The SEC, whose signature you need to sign off on playoff expansion, is never going to sign up if you put a limit on how many teams from an individual conference can make the field. Nor should they. They shouldn't. If I ran the best conference in the land and you needed me, I would never sign off on anything that limited my team's potential to get in your playoff. So you're not going to have that governor on things. You're not going to have that restrictor plate on things you think you'll have. So all of a sudden, you got Jimbo doing what he's doing at A&M. Of course, you got Kirby and Saban doing what they're doing. Billy Napier, early returns, very strong at Florida. Josh Heupel looks to be building an offensive machine at Tennessee. Brian Kelly is one of the most successful coaches in the last 20 years of college football. He's at LSU now. Sam Pittman's doing a remarkable job in year 2, going into year 3 at Arkansas. Lane Kiffin just played in the Sugar Bowl in year 2 at Ole Miss. This conference is loaded, absolutely loaded. And now you want to expand, and there won't be a limit on how many of these teams can make it. You really want to see yourself in a situation, a tournament in college football, where you get in with no cap on the SEC, and all of a sudden now you're watching meaningful playoff games, as opposed to those meaningless bowl games. You're setting yourself up for disaster. And you're setting yourself up down the road for a 3 out of 4 or a 4 out of 4 clean sweep semifinal featuring all SEC teams. And at that point, you'll look in the mirror and you'll say, who would have ever seen this coming? And I'll point to myself, but I'll take no pleasure in doing it, because at that point, things will have already been ruined. You can't go back. You can't go back. No one's going in reverse, because the powers that be will cash their paycheck regardless. And the networks will cash their check regardless. And the venues and whatnot, they'll cash their check regardless. Those are almost like bought events. They're already paid for. You are the one who will suffer for that. If you want to limit the SEC's ability to dominate the postseason, a smaller playoff field is the best weapon you can fashion against the SEC. Just like we saw right now, actually, with an all-SEC final. Had you gone back to the BCS model, one of those teams wouldn't have even been able to participate. And now, as it stands, Alabama had to walk a tightrope. Remember this, they lost to A&M. Had they lost one more game, and they were behind at Auburn, they needed overtime, they played a very tight game against LSU, they played a very tight game against Florida. Alabama almost didn't make this playoff. You expand it to 12, they'll never not make it. Your best weapon against Bama is a small playoff field. I say that, and it kind of falls on deaf ears, as one of my cousins once said. So we'll just move on, and we'll eventually have to swallow whatever they dish out.